that are not being enforced. So why give him this in an election year, the cover of this deal that, critics say is still going to let a lot of people in, but he gets to take a victory lap that he's gotten something done.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not going to let a bunch of people in. It's focused on actually turning people around on it. It is interesting. Republicans 4 months ago would not give funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for our southern border because we demanded changes in policy. So we actually locked arms together and said, we're not going to give you money for this. We want a change in law. And now it's interesting, a few months later, when we're finally getting to the end, they're like, oh, just kidding. I actually don't want a change in law because it's a presidential election year.
Oh, that's gonna hurt.
We all have an oath to the Constitution, and we have a commitment to say we're going to do whatever we can to be able to secure the border.
Wait, so you're telling me that Republicans want us to believe that there is a massive invasion at the border, but also that it doesn't need to be repelled or stopped until January of 2025. Got it.
But sadly, we want to fix it. They want to run on it. They want a political issue to run on in November.
They're still waiting to be able to read the bill on this, and this has been our great challenge of being able to fight through the final words to be able to get the bill text out so people can hear it. Right?
Before we get into it, I have to premise that this same outspoken Republican was also on record over the weekend admitting that while Trump being ordered to pay $83 million to E. Jean Carroll, adding to a seemingly endless list of verdicts and judge orders to pay settlements.
We do have a verdict. E. Jean Carroll did suffer more than nominal damages as a result of Mr. Trump's publication of these two June 2019 statements. So $65 million in punitives, $11 million in the reputation repair program, and $7.3 million in the emotional harm, for a total of $83.3 million.
Doesn't give him any pause regarding him being the nominee for president.
Hey, before I let you go, I want to get your reaction to the news that he was ordered to pay $83 million to a person that a jury found he defamed after a separate jury found that he had sexually assaulted her. Does it give you any pause about him returning to office?
It doesn't. Obviously, these are legal cases. I don't jump in the middle of a legal case. It's been interesting, the number of legal cases that have come up against President Trump and then have failed and have been dropped or have been kicked out of the courts on it. This one's actually went through. He's already said he's going to challenge it. So let the courts actually make their decisions and let the American people make their decisions. So
let's shelve our standing ovation for now, shall we? But anyway, while on Fox News on Sunday, Oklahoma Republican James Lankford, who is, for context, the lead Republican negotiator on the border bill, was asked point blank by the not-so-subtle host about why Republicans would, quote, give Biden the victory. That victory being a way to help combat the very thing that they've been screaming about for the past year to no end.
It's exactly the position that we find ourselves in. Hold the line. None of us want to shut down the government, but we all recognize the fact that every single penny that we are giving to Homeland Security at this point that is not being used to secure our border, that is not being used to increase our national security, but is doing the exact opposite. It is weakening it.
But anyway, it's safe to say his answer was not part of the script.
That are not being enforced. So why give him this in an election year, the cover of this deal that, critics say is still going to let a lot of people in, but he gets to take a victory lap that he's gotten something done.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not going to let a bunch of people in. It's focused on actually turning people around on it. It is interesting. Republicans 4 months ago would not give funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for our southern border because we demanded changes in policy. So we actually locked arms together and said, we're not going to give you money for this. We want a change in law. And now it's interesting, a few months later, when we're finally getting to the end, they're like, oh, just kidding. I actually don't want a change in law because it's a presidential election year. We all have an oath to the Constitution, and we have a commitment to say we're going to do whatever we can to be able to secure the border. Just as a quick, for instance, the last 4 months, we've had 50 people cross our border on the terror watch list. 50. We've had tens of thousands of people that were declared by this administration a national security risk that came across our border and were released. It is our constitutional obligation to be able to secure our country as fast as we can secure our country. This puts in mandatory pieces that haven't been there in the past to make this administration actually enforce the law. I would tell you that I don't know of anyone that believes that if President Trump was elected, well, he was president right now, this border would not have this problem. So the thought that somehow President Biden can suddenly be the pro-national security president in the final months of this.
And here is the thing. She tells on herself immediately, as many Republicans have also done regarding this bill, by saying it wouldn't help stop border crossings. This is simply false, as Lankford himself said, citing the literal language of the bill that states there would be, quote,
they're still waiting to be able to read the bill on this, and this has been our great challenge of being able to fight through the final words to be able to get the bill text out so people can hear it. Right now, there's internet rumors is all that people are running on. It would be absolutely absurd for me to agree to 5,000 people a day. This bill focuses on getting us to 0 illegal crossings a day. There's no amnesty. It increases the number of Border Patrol agents. It increases asylum officers. It increases detention beds so we can quickly detain and then deport individuals. It ends catch and release. It focuses on additional deportation flights out. It changes our asylum process so that people get a fast asylum screening at a higher standard and then get returned back to their home country. This is not about letting 5,000 people in a day. This is the most misunderstood section of this proposal.
While the Biden administration highlighted a memo this weekend from several top Republicans calling for congressional action on the border.
The issue, Donald Trump, this is what he's doing.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump. And the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
Their de facto speaker, Mike Johnson, who at this point, we wouldn't be surprised if anyone noticed the strings were showing, blatantly refusing despite saying this several times in the past. And I quote, "America is the most compassionate nation in the world, but our immigration system is broken. Reforming that system is a job for Congress, and any balanced legislative approach must include measures to strengthen border security. This bill will help ensure that our asylum system is reserved for those truly seeking refuge in America from violence or persecution." More quotes from Mike Johnson. "To encourage the leaders of your party in both houses of Congress to work with us on the Republican side to solve these problems with substantive legislation. I myself have filed legislation which could achieve bipartisan consensus." Mike Johnson continues. "Humanitarian crisis at our southern border calls for immediate congressional action. Loopholes in the US immigration laws are putting Americans and migrants at risk every day. These loopholes provide perverse incentives for adults to send children on the hazardous journey across the border."
We don't know what's happening to them on the way. Yeah. This is a humanitarian crisis. We walk through the centers today, Jake. It would make the average American citizen cry to see what's happening here, and it must stop.
Right, which is why some people are saying, why not pass the $14 billion supplemental bill?
Right, they won't do a darn thing.
Well, no. I'm sure the people, the Border Patrol agents that you're with think it might do something, at least in terms of making their job a little easier for the next month or so.
No, actually they don't.
They don't want the $14 billion?
Is anyone surprised that all of a sudden, when Trump pulls at the strings a little bit, any action to combat the issue is now deemed redundant?
Senate Republicans have been working on a bipartisan package that includes increased border security, something they say they want, and new funding also for Ukraine. It's definitely imperfect, this bill. But just sticking with the Republican electorate here, lots of Republican leaders are out there saying this deal is basically as good as it's ever going to get. But of course, there is just one big problem.
The president actually just got off the phone with me right before the show, and he said he has spoken to you about this deal and that he is against it, and he urged you to be against this deal. He was President Trump was extremely adamant about that. Your reaction to that, given the fact that, look, he knows how to do this enforcement stuff. You don't need some new bill coming out of the Senate to get the border enforced.
Yeah, President Trump is not wrong. He and I have been talking about this pretty frequently. I talked to him night before last about the same subject.
There it is. You can always rely on Mike Johnson, by the way, to take direction from his boss, Donald Trump, when necessary. But we all know the real reason Trump wants to tank this deal. He doesn't actually care about solving the problem at the border. He wants the problem. He wants the issue to run on because it is the fear-mongering, the scare tactics that he is betting on to excite his voters and his base.
As many prominent Democrats have said, from Vice President Harris.
And we offered a solution early on and invited bipartisan work. Let's work on it to fix this. And in fact, we have right now a proposal for $14 billion. so that we can put more resources to address this very situation. And we hope and are really trying to compel, in particular, some of the Republicans in Congress to participate in the solution. But sadly, we want to fix it. They want to run on it.
Gavin Newsom.
They won't touch it. They don't want to solve this problem. They want to use it for political purposes. And again, I say this as a border state governor. No one has to introduce me to this issue. We're the largest port in the Western Hemisphere in the state of California. We live this. And I think it is a disgrace what the Republican Party is doing, what Donald Trump is doing. And this is hidden in plain sight.
Republicans simply don't want solutions. They want chaos.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.